Today I'm looking at this Kodesh La Adonai. This is in Exodus chapter 28, verse, 36. And I'm looking here at the holy clothing that the Kohen Gadol, Aaron, is wearing, including the mitznofet, the mitre, the headgear, and also the kesonas, and it's all here. I can't take the time to read it all, but it's all here. And why is this important? It's important because of this little word right here. Sigma, Omicron, Epsilon, Delta, Alpha, Rho, Iota, Omicron, Ni. And the word is a Latin word that's put in Greek letters. Sudarion. And I want to talk to you about what this word means. And it's very important. And we're going to get to this, the Kohen Gadol's garb on Yom Kippur. We're going to talk about that. But we're also going to talk about Lazarus, because you see this as he's coming out of the tomb here in John chapter 11. You see this head covering? His face is completely covered. The shroud is wrapped around his head, and he's in white linen, just like the Kohen Gadol. He's in a white shroud. It's actually a two-piece shroud. One piece covers his body and one piece covers his head. And the head part is the Sudarion, John chapter 20, verse 7. And that's what we want to talk about right now. And so I want to explain to you that the Hevra Kadisha, those ladies, the FDs, the funeral directors, when they did the takrahim, the shrouds, they had one piece of cloth that covered his head. Now, why is this important? Let me just take a roll of paper towels. Let's imagine that this was the head piece. Now, I walk around all day long holding one of these in my hands. Why? Well, I've daubed my eyes with it. I have, my nose is always running from sinuses. I'm always doing that. And this is what the Romans did. They carried their sudarion. It's a Latin word. They carried it around. So in order for the Goyim to understand what he's talking about here, John uses this word sudarion. But the word doesn't really connote the functional use of this shroud, because this shroud covers the head and the back of the head and the top of the head and the whole face. And why? Well, let me ask you, if you're walking down the street and somebody drops dead and the ambulance is on the way, but somebody takes the pulse and they see the person is dead, very often someone will take his jacket or something and just cover his face. Why do they do that? Well, it's respect for the dead. Now, if someone has a marred countenance, it says in Isaiah 53 that his face was more marred than any man. The bloody whip lashes and the crown of thorns and all the blood, the gashes, having been hit and slapped and smacked and punched, his face had to be covered. Now, the sun was going down and Shabbos was about ready to start at sundown on Friday. So those FDs, the Miriams, all those ladies, they had to get out of there and they had to get home. And so they would have to return on the first day of the week with the embalming spices. This was for the smell. Very strong spices to cover the odor of a decomposing rigor mortis body. They're going to come back on the first day of the week with that. But obviously, they would still want to put the shroud over the body, and they would want to put the head shroud over the face. And they did that. I'm sure they did that. And you know, these Hever Kadisha ladies are very, very, they're very extremely fastidious about this. Nothing is left to chance. The linen body bag, basically, that covers the body, and the face cloth that covers the face, they take care of that. And these are called the takrihim, the shrouds. And so I want to speak to you about this enveloping, restricting shroud. Who could escape from it? How could you get out of it? You know, there was a guy named Houdini, and when they put him in a box with all kinds of chains and locks, and then they had some kind of crane with a steel cable drop him down into the river, it looked like, especially after 2 or 3 minutes went by, he was dead. He was drowned. How could he ever get out of there? And when he would swim to the surface, after everybody had just about gone crazy with the anxiety, how could somebody hold their breath almost 4 minutes? And even if they could, how could they get out of there? Some people even fantasized that he was able to, like, beam me up, Scotty, you know, like dematerialize and then materialize outside the cell, you know, the Chinese water torture cell or whatever it was. And so when he was getting ready to die, because somebody punched him and he had appendicitis, and he was just peritonitis was just eating him up, and he was going to die. He told his wife that if he could escape and speak to her from the other side, there was a coded message that only they knew. And so any phony spiritist doing the seance who gave a message from Houdini, she would know that it was a phony message because she knew the secret message that he would give if he could. But you know what? Death was one locked up condition that he could not escape. And here we're talking about the risen one leaving his clothes, the clothes that enveloped him and restricted him. And how could he do it unless he had a new unearthly heavenly existence where he could, even though the room was locked, he could appear in the middle of the room, and not a ghost, but they could actually feel him. He could eat a piece of fish. But he did materialize in their midst. They saw him. This was absolutely amazing. Now, when it comes to the two Shilahim running to the tomb, you've got little John. He's younger and faster. He gets there first. And he looks in and he sees the Takrihim. And immediately he becomes a believer because he puts 2 and 2 together. Because the Takrahim were like collapsed, like a cocoon. A grave robber would have picked the body up and got out of there fast with the shroud intact on the body. And there was no way for a dead man to get out of the shroud without unwinding it if he were resuscitated. But this thing was like a collapsed cocoon where the air just went out of it. And this was enough to bring the beloved disciple to faith. However, Kepha, he arrives next, and he goes inside. He stoops down and goes inside. And he's the one who sees the head shroud. And what about the head shroud? You know, if this were a detective story, we would have to have a Sherlock Holmes come in here and explain to us why that thing was folded up so neatly and who, in fact, folded it. Did one of the Marys fold it up, take it off his face and fold it up and say, it's almost Shabbos, we got to get out of here? Or did somebody else? An angel? Did an angel do it? Who did it? Who folded up the head cloth? Who did that? And the answer seems to be that Yeshua himself did it. He did all things well. And having materialized outside this restrictive cocoon of this body shroud, and now risen from the dead and ready to start appearing to his Shalahim, he has taken off the face cloth and very carefully folded it up and put it there next to the other body shroud. And when Peter saw this, although Peter still hadn't put two and two together yet, this was obvious that no grave robber had been there. No grave robber had been there. And whoever did that must have also done a Houdini escape from a mummy-like wrap of the shroud around the body. And that person was not a magician, my friend. That person was the one who, if Psalm 16:10 is telling the truth, if that is not a lie, the Moshiach would have to do that. His body would not see shachat. His body would not see corruption. And, they said, look, by this time, Lazarus would be stinking. This is the fourth day. So how are you going to raise him from the dead, Yeshua? But he did. Lazarus, come forth. And when the man came out of the tomb, he was almost hopping because he was bound, feet and hands, and his face was covered. The head shroud and the body shroud restricted him. And that is a picture of how Yeshua was when the women said, look, the sun is going down. We got to get out of here. We'll finish this on Sunday morning. We'll bring the spices and come back. This is how he was when they left. But when the sun came up, Yeshua stood up before they came and before they saw the angels and before they saw the Bar Enosh alive from the dead. Now here I am. I'm a translator, right? And I've got to figure out how to translate this word. The word here is sudarion. John chapter 20, verse 7. Now, as I said a while ago, I walk around with a shmata, or a handkerchief, or a scarf. You might say it's not a scarf. A scarf would be a tickle. I walk around with this thing, and I'm always daubing my nose and wiping my eyes. Well, that's what the word is in Latin. But I wanted to find something that would fit more with the holy shrouds that are put on the niftar and placed in the aron, the casket, at a Jewish funeral, that pine casket. And by the way, if you get buried in Israel, very often they will not bury you in a casket. You'll just be buried in your shrouds, and that's it. And I wanted to find a word that would fit. And, Yeshua had this seamless kesonis, John chapter 19, verse 23, which they gambled for. And this was because he's the Kohen Le'olam al Divrei Melchizedek, Psalm 110, verse 4. And this term is also used in Leviticus 16:4 and Exodus 28, where the Kohen Gadol nasa, he carries the avon, the iniquities of the people on Yom Kippur. And Yeshua was going to carry them away, a Yom Kippur type of nasa, to fulfill Isaiah 53, which has the word in it. But he was going to do it as the Pesach lamb, the lamb led to the slaughter, Isaiah 53:7. And so I was looking at this, and the idea of a face cloth is not enough. It is a face cloth wrapped So it is like disposable surgeon's bonnet. A bonnet which would be strapped under here, while the wrapping is under the chin and over the head and across the face. They put these bonnets on helmets in the Israeli army. And both in the Torah and in modern Hebrew, this kind of a bonnet, this hoiv, is a Yiddish word, hoiv. This word is, it's right here in the Orthodox Jewish Bible. Isaiah 28, verse 39. Mitznefet, a mitznefet. And so when I translated it, I use the word mitznefet because the idea of a white linen Kohen Gadol, high priest like kitan or kesonas or tunic, shroud that's white, like the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. He had a white kesonas that he wore, and the idea of the headdress, the mitznefet. I wanted to use that word because the word napkin is not really correct, as you find in some Hebrew New Testaments. The word kerchief in Yiddish is not really right. But in Yiddish, the word hoiv or bonnet is used, and that word is translated in modern Hebrew as mitznefet. And that's what the high priest wore, the mitznefet. And so the shroud for the head, that's how I translated it in John chapter 20, verse 7. But the point is, it wasn't just a shmata, a rag. It wasn't like what I carry around, a rag to wipe my nose and my eyes. No, it wasn't that. It was something holy that when today in a modern Hever Kadisha situation, they would take earth from Israel and put it on this face cloth. They would actually sprinkle the earth on the eyes and on the heart and on the feet, and they would say certain prayers. But friend, let me tell you something. Yeshua did the greatest escape act in the history of the world. That little Jewish Houdini is sort of a picture of what Yeshua actually did do. And I want to tell you something. One day, you're going to have your final dressing. Just like Moses dressed Aaron, the Hever Kadisha people are going to dress you. And they're going to put the body shroud on you and the head shroud on you. But I have good news for you. That one Jew stood up alive and folded his head shroud. And when Peter saw it, this was the beginning of the Basuras HaGeolah, that the good news was fulfilled, that the Moshiach was alive. Yosef Chai, he's alive. We saw him. And wouldn't it be a terrible thing, my friend, if you died and this meant nothing to you, and the great escape from that terrible shroud that Lazarus experienced. But even you have to remember, that was just a resuscitation. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the Tehiyas Hamasim, the resurrection of the dead ones. Yeshua was alive forevermore. And I want to ask you right now to pray to receive him. I want to ask you to solve this detective mystery. Who folded up the head shroud? I want you to believe. I'm asking you to believe like John did, the beloved disciple, Yohanan. He saw those takrichim and he believed. I'm asking you to believe, to receive him into your heart. I feel so bad about these Muslim women. They walk around with the burqa and then they have a veil over their entire face. You can't even see their eyes. And they're walking around in this black outfit. and they don't know about the wonderful miracle that Yeshua stood up alive and took that face veil and that head garb, that bonnet, that mitznefet. He took it off of himself. He folded it neatly. He laid it down on the floor of the cave tomb, and then he started appearing. Hallelujah. And I'm praying he will appear to you. He will appear in dreams. He will appear in your prayers. He will come to you. You will know him. You will believe in him. You will receive him. And everybody said amen.